I'm Christian Ashley, and you're listening to the Why I Don't Like podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Why I Don't Like podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, here to entertain you as I sit down and record episodes on the media that I consume, and yet I don't like. We will be continuing today through the first season, part 1 of Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation. We'll be in episodes 9 through 11 today. This is just your friendly reminder at the beginning. There will be no edits for this. I am not an editor. There's not anyone around me right now who has the illustrious task of doing this for free, and I'm fine with that. So if you're not, that's okay. Leave in peace. We will meet elsewhere. So for today, as I always like to do with these, I want to start with something that I do like. And I am switching this up real quick. I'd been thinking about this in the background for a while. Like, shouldn't I just keep it within like the genre I'm discussing instead of being all over the place? So yeah, I think I'm going to stick with that and see if it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, it does. So I'm going to stick with anime, and I'm going to talk about Monster. Naoki Urasawa's Monster. I may have spoken about him before. This man is a goddamn genius. If I had a tenth of his ability as a writer, I would consider myself to be extremely successful, and Monster is no exception. It is one of those stories where uh, takes place in, if I remember correctly, in the 1990s in Germany. Got a Japanese doctor who protects a patient versus another patient who his goodness gracious, his leaders want him to show preferential care for. Instead, he goes for the child. That child ends up as a serial killer. But because he's the one who saved his life, leaves him alive and starts killing the people who make him start to lose his job and stuff like that, which makes him the primary suspect. And it's him realizing that that child is who he is, and him trying to track down the mysterious Johann. I could go into more depth, but that's not where we're about. This is just about me trying to get you to watch those things that I do like instead of the things that I don't. But I do know there are some of you out there who either you are getting the story of Mushoku Tensei solely through this podcast, or you're actually watching them for the first time and then listening to these episodes. So I'm blown away by that. I'm very happy to hear that. So thank you for your support. And without any further ado, let us get into this bad boy, as I definitely just messed up my document there. So that's a lot of fun, having to scroll through all these pages in real time. And we're going to start today in episode 9, A Chance Encounter. We find Rudeus looking around himself, seeing himself in a bit of a dream void, but in his original body. There's some not enough steam. There's some sensor steam around, so we don't see anything. Well, we see too much, but that's an author choice. He figures that he's dead until he's greeted by an entity shaped like a man who greets Rudeus, and he calls himself the Man God. That is capital MAN dash capital GOD. He's been watching over Rudeus, and he offers him some help because he says that he's on Rudeus' side, which Rudeus finds laughable because he made Rudeus feel like he had a chance to have a second life in this world. And now that he's lost that in his own mind, and there's not even an attempt he can have at positive thinking, and that was just as worthless in his old life as it is in his new life. The Man God then says that Rudeus' new life isn't over yet. And he's seeing himself as his old body because that's his mental form. Oh, like I've been saying this whole time. Interesting. Assuring Rudeus that he'll wake up in his new body. Rudeus asks if the Man God wants to send him back to his old world, but he says that he can't send him away from the six-sided world they're in, and he wasn't the one who reincarnated Rudeus, saying the wicked dragon god's better at that. Rudeus refuses to listen to him because he's a fishy guy, but the man god insists, as Rudeus will die without his help, since the demon continent is a very harsh land with a lot of monsters and very little food. This perks Rudeus up a little bit, and the man god explains that Rudeus got caught in a massive mana cataclysm and was transported there. Now, after hearing this, Rudeus relents a little bit and listens to the man god tell him to rely on the man that he wakes up near and that Rudeus is supposed to help him. So let us start with this bad boy. The introduction of the man god of Hitogami, which I believe is man god is a literal translation of, I think, because Gami and Kami both mean god. I know Ningen means human, so I'm not sure where the Hito comes in. I'm not a Japanese expert, sue me. But this is a character who is going to be not a major character, but someone who is definitely behind the scenes working, someone who's going to be meeting with Rudeus multiple times over, even in this season, and has that air of mystery around him. Like, what's his deal? Like, is he actually someone looking out for Rudeus? Is he someone who is playing him? I got to tell you, my initial reaction was, okay, well, maybe Rudeus has someone on his side, but as time has gone on with the man god character, I most definitely don't agree with that. And I'm not going to spoil everything there because some of it we'll get to today. But I definitely see him as an abuser. I see the man god as someone who is manipulating events for his own ends, and I think he's definitely playing Rudeus to like give him just enough of truth so that things come into being. And there's certainly one thing that happens here that would have happened regardless. So I haven't finalized that yet. Like I have no ideas of what happens in a light novel. If he was revealed to be a good guy all along or a bad guy or what have you. I'm gonna lean bad guy, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I feel that way because of how he acts, and it's ironic for people who've actually read my own work because certain parts and aspects of how he talks to Rudeus, how he relates to Rudeus, is very much like one of my characters, Nathaniel David Parker or Nathan, in my own writing. And he's the kind of guy, his job is like guardian of the multiverses, guardians of the narrative flow of reality and stuff like that. And he will act in a way that's a very trolly kind of behavior, but also in a very stealth mentor kind of way. So that it gets people to do what they're supposed to do without him outright telling them what to do. And he gets to play with them along the way just because that's his sense of humor. I don't get that from the man god. I think the man god comes across, at least to me, as someone who likes picking at people, who likes saying, yeah, I told you the truth, but it's really because I wanted these things to happen. So you got what you wanted, but I really got what I wanted. And yeah, I can't get behind him. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's where I'm at. But we'll move from there to Rudeus's skepticism about this whole thing. Now, if we look at Rudeus, there is not a God-fearing man in there. I can't imagine why anyone would ever think that. And it makes sense for him to be like this. You see him in his old life, you see him in Japan, and we've probably talked about this before. Maybe I said it multiple times, but we're talking about a country where less than 2% of the population is Christian. So there's no real huge belief in a singular deity. Now there are plenty of, Shintoism, there's a little bit of Hinduism, and some people inside of Buddhism and Confucianism do worship a god or gods. There's not really the big point of Buddhism or Confucianism. Goodness gracious, I went through all of them. But as a culture, Japan has a really interesting history with its mythologies of multiple pantheons of different gods, of there being gods for the specific hill, gods for the specific mountain and lake. all this. It's very Greek in that sense too. Although most of the on the Greek side of things, most of them would be like lesser things like naiads and dryads and stuff like that. Wouldn't have too many gods of like a specific river, but it did happen. In Japan, it happens way more frequently. So, him coming from that society, that background, tells me, okay, yeah, this god comes out of nowhere. Well, where was he in my old life? What was he doing? That's an excellent question, which gets answered by the man god, at least if we can trust him, saying that he can't affect things outside of this. Oh, how did he word it? The six-sided world that they're in. Well, the six-sided world. Tell me what that means. That is that cool little bit of lore you just put in. I'm going, okay, I see what you're doing, but I want an explanation for that thing. What does it mean? Six-sided world? Is it like a a Norse mythology kind of thing where there are multiple different planes, multiple different worlds on top of each other, and Yggdrasil and all that mess? Or are there different realities in play here? Six realities, like six different planets? What's going on? And as far as I can remember, this hasn't been explained yet. If it has, it's because I've just forgotten it. So that leaves me fascinated. But Rudius, I actually like this about what he's doing right now. It makes sense for him to be a very skeptical person when someone comes in and claims to be a deity, claims to be someone who's been watching over him. Because if you looked at Rudius's life, it ain't good. Now, that's a very poor understanding of how the problem of evil and everything like that, but I don't expect him to be as big on that part of theology as someone like me who has studied it more extensively. So I give him a pass there. Doesn't make him right, but I give him a pass. So I like that aspect. The other thing that I really like and what makes this my favorite episode, minus one thing that happens later, out of this entire season is the explanation of what the heck just happened, and that is the massive mana cataclysm. This is what I was talking about last time, where I wish I had been the one to come up with this idea. We're going to get further explanation in a bit, but I can just go ahead and tell you, like, people, due to these monocataclysms, are randomly teleported all over the planet. This is such a good story idea. It forces characters into situations they are not prepared for. All the petty things that they were worrying about before then, the whole gray rat succession thing, um, who he's going to end up married to along the way. None of that matters right now because they are about as far away from home as possible. And it's going to happen, as we find out in other episodes, to pretty much almost every single person we know that have been named in the show. That is astounding. That is such a stellar idea, and I love that idea. And I even love the execution for the most part. It's one of those things that when I'm looking at the entirety of this story, it makes me go, I wish this was written by a better person because I have a great idea here, but then they ruin it with things like Rudius. We'll get there when we get there. But let me just say right here, the show is called Why I Don't Like, but it's not called Why I Hate because there are things in this show that even I like. And I dare say I love this idea. It makes perfect sense in the story that we've crafted so far for this to be what they're going to have to engage with, what's going on, and it forces characters into situations they are not prepared for, and it's going to show them who they actually are. That is brilliant. And I'm saying this all right now because there's some things later on I'm not big on. Imagine that. Show is called Why I Don't Like. So we're going to move over to the next scene where Rudius wakes up, finding he's by a fire with a sleeping Eris nearby. He wonders where Ghislaine is at and sees a green-haired man with a red gem in his forehead. And he realizes that this makes him a Superd, who also has a massive spear that could easily kill either one of them. Rudius instinctively brings out his staff, But when the man doesn't make any threatening moves, he relents and speaks to him first in the human god tongue, then in demon god, asking the man if God sent him, because if you'll recall, the man god did say, you need to be with this guy who you wake up next to and help him. Now, the attempt at communication surprises the man, who says that he doesn't understand a question, simply saying that they fell out of the sky and that he made the fire to save them, to give them heat after they fell. Rudeus thanks him for saving them and asks if anyone else came with them. But he says he only found them, so as far as they're aware, Ghislaine is somewhere far removed from the scenario. Rudeus thanks him for saving them. Oh, sorry, I said that. The man asks if the sight of him frightens Rudeus, but Rudeus says that it would be rude to be afraid of the man who saved them, which makes the man call Rudeus a strange child. Rudeus then introduces himself, and the man names himself as Ruijierd Superdia. Rudeus asks where they are, and Ruijierd tells him that they are in Baigoya, I think is how you pronounce that, at the northeast region of the Demon Continent. Rudeus then thinks about how they're extremely far away from home and wonders how long it would take to get back there. And Ruijierd asks how they got there, and Rudeus explains that it was a big monocataclysm. Ruijierd assures him he'll escort them back to their homeland and pats Rudeus on the head, saying abandoning him would ruin the Superior's honor, although he admits their reputation is already beyond repair. Eris then wakes up screaming after seeing Ruijierd as Rudeus tries to get her to calm down, but she tries to run away, asking Ghislaine for help, apologizing to Rudeus for breaking their promise, and then she starts to cry. And Ruijierd stoically states that's a normal reaction to seeing him and calls Rudeus weird for not doing so, but not in a bad way. They eventually calm Eris down, and she greets him while trembling and stuttering, calling herself Eris Bababorius Grey Rat, which Ruijierd says her name incorrectly, which, of course, makes her mad and helps calm her down, ironically enough. Being Eris being Eris. Rudeus then assures her that they can be friends, and after explaining things, Eris calls her mother a liar for telling her to be afraid of the Superior. Rudeus gets Ruijierd to ask Eris to be his friend, which she agrees to in her usual tsundere fashion. Rudeus then spends some time thinking, declaring he has to get Eris back home. This is yet another example of a well-written character being a side character, even side characters above side character, not the main character like Rudeus, but someone who is amazing as a character versus our main character, Ruijierd. I've pronounced it like 50 different ways, and I'm sure the dub does that too. So that maybe that's why I'm the way I am on that. So I apologize for anyone who's a big stickler for that. I don't blame you. So Ruijierd is a phenomenal character in this show. Someone that has a lot to learn, someone that has a lot of baggage, as we're going to find out in these 3 episodes, and someone who I admire as a character. His introduction is fascinating because, well, what's Rudeus's reaction? Was going to be what everyone's reaction to seeing the boogeyman essentially has just sat him down by a fire. So he's afraid. But because he hasn't been totally raised in this cultural context, and he has enough of a sense of self to realize what happened, Rudeus speaks with him, using his knowledge of the demon god language, which was one of the best decisions he ever made, to speak with Ruijierd. And that gets him excited. You can see in the animation, like there's a bit where Ruijierd is kind of, oh, this kid's a little more than I thought he was. And that establishes a rapport between them that makes the rest of these episodes work. as we end our first part of the season here. And how he handles Eris is great too, because hey, he doesn't make any threatening moves. He's used to it, and you can tell this is a man who suffered a lot of prejudice. But he hasn't let him affect him to the point where he's not going to help out other people. And I love Ruijierd. I love his art. And I wish he were around more, but I understand what a story going where it's going as the anime has just finished, or at least season 2, part 2, with an announcement for season 3. So when it does happen, we will cover it. I understand why he's not there right now. So continuing on, the next day, they then start on the journey home and going through the wastelands of the demon continent. We see Rudeus using water magic so they can get some water. Ruijierd has also gone ahead of them and hunted a giant tortoise and explained to Eris that he saw it when they didn't sense it because of the gem on his head, which makes her excited. She says she likes it. And he comments that there's been many times he didn't want to have it. So she offers to take it instead, which he declines. Eris explains that she can fight with a sword, and Rudeus says he can help with magic, but Ruijierd tells him that children shouldn't fight, saying Eris and her big brother shouldn't need to worry about this, which, of course, makes Eris mad that she is the older one out of the two. They then reach a village where the homes are made out of tortoise shells. As they enter and are told by a guard, Rowan, that they're suspicious and won't be let in until Ruijierd starts advocating on their behalf. This gets Rowan to use telepathy to contact the chief to talk with them, as Ruijierd explains to Rudeus, saying that they are the Magurdia tribe. And this is something special about them as part of a different demon tribe. The chief then arrives and speaks with them, complimenting Rudeus when he acts very respectfully, and that he speaks their language well, which he is congratulated over. And the chief says his name is Rokus and asks Rudeus where he got his necklace as he looks at it. And he explains that his master Roxy gave it to him, which makes Rowan freak out as that's his daughter's name and that this is her hometown. Eris gets excited exploring the town as Rudeus sees that the people really do look like her. Rowan explains that Roxy left the village about 20 years ago and hasn't been in touch for a while. Rudeus asks how old they get, and he says that they can reach 200 if nothing goes wrong, and that Roxy would be 44 right now. He then asks if Roxy's safe, and Rudeus catches him up on her, wistfully calling him under his breath his father-in-law, as he wonders if his family's okay too. Oh, I'm so glad it took this time for you to finally figure that out, Rudeus. Oh yeah, if I'm uh, transported all the way here, what about my family? Wonder why that didn't crop up earlier. Almost like you don't think of them as much of your family. So let's go with this is a huge coincidence. It is a coincidence of coincidences that they end up right next to where Roxy grew up and everything there. We've known Roxy is a demon this whole time of a different tribe and stuff like that. She's afraid of the superb. So that's something that seems to have changed since she left. But really, like I can excuse this, and I do ultimately because it gets enough across. But out of all the places in the world they were teleported to, it just happened to be where he had a personal relationship, a connection to someone who used to be from there. I can see why people would be upset about that. I am a little bit, but it does serve the story. It helps to characterize Roxy, even when she's not in the room, by how her dad thinks of her. We'll eventually meet her mom in a little bit, and how they're like barely looking any older than her, and all that. And also showcases to them, well, if Roxy thinks this guy is important, we better be taking care of him. It's very useful. It's a very good use of a Chekhov's gun there, and that she did give him the necklace. It's been seen, and now they uh, treat him well because of it. I have no issue with that. It's just really that's where they landed. It's fine. So from there, they eat with the chief as Eris falls asleep on Rudeus' lap and he pervs on her, which makes the chief remark that they must be close. And he asks how they plan to get home. Ruijierd says that he'll take them, but the chief says it's a bad idea as people don't like the Superb. As Ruijierd says, he'll kill anyone who gets in the way. Oh boy. Yeah. Which makes the chief remark that Ruijierd always gets single-minded when it comes to children. Rudeus then asks what Ruijerd's goal is, which the chief explains is to dispel the myth about the Superb being evil, which Rudeus finds impossible. As the Superb were said to have attacked everyone, regardless of who they were, which makes Ruijierd say it's a lie, saying it was all Laplace's scheme and he betrayed them. Laplace being one of the heroes of earlier ages. Ruijierd then explains that their spears were given to them by Laplace and made them go crazy when the spear's magic made them confuse friend and foe alike, and none of them noticed until it was too late, killing their own families alongside their enemies. And he brings his spear out and says that his spear is the soul of his son, who died saving Ruijierd from himself, and their infamy is deserved. But as the leader of their warriors, it falls on him to reclaim their legacy from 400 years ago. Rudy says that he understands their regret and he kind of reflects on his own life in the past and says, "Hey, I'm going to promise I'm going to help you to do that." And Ruijierd accepts it. They then meet Rokari, who's Roxy's mother, who looks extremely young but is actually 102 years old. Rowan asks him to tell Roxy to talk to them if they ever see her again, and Rudeus calls him father-in-law, which makes Rokari blush and Rowan push it off as a joke, as they give them supplies for the road and a sword. Eris thanks them for their kindness and they leave. Rudeus says he promised to help Ruijierd, saying the old him would have laughed at himself for doing this, but he wants to be better this time around. Backstory time, world building time, baby. This is where it's at. We've already had the phenomenal thing about the mana. Now we have the Superb aren't what they thought we were, what we thought they were. And that is such a great moment. You can feel the anger, and both sub and dub from the voice actors of Ruijierd explaining his past and how they were betrayed and how his son is no longer around. That is extremely well acted on both sides. And the writing is solid too. And in fact, I think this may be the highest episode I have rated. There may be another one later on, but looking at this for just the world building aspect, phenomenal. We learn that the cultural stigma against the Superb is something that makes sense for them for why they don't like them, but it doesn't make sense for why they should hate them because they don't have the full story. The world thinks of them as these villainous monsters who would kill friend and foe alike without any regard for them. Well, that's because they were tricked and betrayed, and now the stigma exists hundreds of years after the fact. And that is so great. You can see this is where Ruijierd really started to shine to me. I liked him to begin with, but right here, you can hear the anguish in his voice. You can hear the suffering he's had to endure for 400 some years based off of this one decision he made forever ago. His people made as well. But we also have to deal with Rudeus as I smack my microphone. It's a small scene compared to everything else, but imagine this. Rudeus hasn't given up being Rudeus. While Eris is completely helpless in front of him in a very vulnerable position, what does he do? Imagines what he could be doing with her in a room with other people looking at him. I hate that part of him so much because I'm about to give him some more credit with my next thing, but he just has to ruin it. This would have been an A+ of an episode if this scene had not happened. And this whole thing with his fixation on Roxy, who, by the way, we have learned is 44, and he just turned 10 not too long ago. So that, if you're keeping score, that's a 34-year difference. Now, mentally, I think he's 3 years older, or maybe he's 3 years younger than her with the combined ages. That's cool if he talked to her about it, if she hadn't have known him as a kid. But we'll get there when we get there, a very long time from now. But I do want to praise Rudeus on something here. The self-reflection, the one time in his life he's actually doing it. His desire to help Ruijierd out after hearing the injustice of what happened is a great scene. Is a great moment for him. And he even acknowledges if he had not gone through what he has gone through, he would have laughed at the idea of him doing something positive for this guy he just met. But he wants to be better this time around. And if he had fully committed to that, I would say he's a good character. But because he's still Rudeus, he's going to ruin everything. Rudeus ruins everything. Yeah, but not as much in the next episode. Episode 10. The Value of a Life and the First Job. We start with Rudeus and Ruijierd watching as Eris dispatches some strange, kind of wolf-like beasts. As Rudeus says, he could help, but she doesn't hear him and is extremely proud of herself. They then cook the meat to eat as Eris, continuing to be very pleased with herself, says that she always dreamed of living like this. And if you've watched her grow, you see that she was never meant to live the life of a lady. This is like the perfect opportunity for her to grow and become what she always wanted to be. Living out on the edge, being an adventurer, just making decisions on a day-to-day basis instead of thinking of ballrooms and political machinations and stuff like that. That's not her. This is her. She's finding out. Now, Rudeus also tries to eat some maggots, wishing for rice and beef, which I can get with you there, buddy. Now, they continue traveling, finding the cliffs that are just outside the city of Rikarisu, which is their next destination. They're about to enter, as Rudeus sees many different types of demons who take on more animalistic forms. You've got your typical, your more humanoid demons, as a Roxy's tribe. These are the ones that are going to be a bit more like your pigs and insects and reptiles and stuff like that. Yeah, they're called the same. It doesn't make sense, but it's fine. They're all demons. They're just under that blanket term. Let's just roll with it. And they see that there's a large security check at the gate. And the people there are checking because they heard that Dead End has been spotted nearby, which scares some adventurers. Ruijierd then explains that there are many different types of demons and that Dead End is him. Ruijierd wants to leap into the city, but Rudeus stops him, saying it'll make the city panic, so they decide instead to dye Ruijierd's hair with some blue material and hide his gem. A little bit, they eventually show it, saying that they came from Migard village, and then they go to explore the town. A very effective opening scene here. We're in a new city on a continent far removed from what Rudeus and Eris are aware of. Ruijierd is the only one who can help them out with this. But it comes with that huge caveat of he's a Superhead. And if they find that out, bad things going to be happening. So Rudeus uses some of his, ingenuity and finds a way past that, dyeing Ruijierd's hair. Smart move. And it helps them out immensely. And of course, we had the opening scene with Eris. Like I discussed it earlier, this is who she was meant to be. Carefree, living off the land, being an adventurer, just killing things. Like, this is our favorite little tomboy Tsundere's purpose in life. And as things go on, it's where she's going to end up. But we'll get there when we get there. Now, next up, we see our group buy some gear and notice that their funds are depleting. But there's an adventurers guild where they plan to join to get money. They watch adventurers brawling with each other and announce themselves as a party, with Ruijierd leading them, which makes the adventurers all laugh as Rudeus has said that he is dead in, and they tell him, well, the hair's the wrong color and they're just a bunch of kids. So why do you think you could get away with this? They have named their party Dead End as Rudeus, being Rudeus, pervs on, I think this is supposed to be like a snake or a lamia like secretary demon woman. Point being, hey, not only does she have two large breasts, she has three, and he pervs on all three of them like he has nothing better to do with his life. And she tells him, either not noticing or not caring about what he's ogling right now, that they have to start off as F rank, and they can only accept jobs at the most one rank above their current standing. So, for example, they could do F rank missions or E rank missions, but if they were B rank, they could do A rank and anything below B. Now, they select one after Eris declares that she can't read them, and yet another great Eris scene. Oh, why did the side characters are so much better than Rudius? Rudius then picks up a C rank extermination mission just out of curiosity, which gets a horse like demon who will eventually get a name later on to make fun of him. And he gives Rudius some advice, saying he should just pick the one about a lost cat. Because if Rudius is really who he says he is, excuse me, if Ruijierd's really the one who says he is, then his magic eye will find the cat no problem. And as they're about to leave, we see a frog like demon try to trip Ruijierd, who glares at him and makes that demon back down as the guild makes more fun of the newbies. Whew. If you've read as many and watched as many trash isekai as I have, this is one of the most, what's what I'm looking for? This is one of the biggest cliches of the genre. There's no other way to put it. It's one of the biggest cliches of the genre is the adventurers guild and the ranking systems, whether it's like, we do mithril era or adamantine, or we go, you're all the way up to S rank, S for special, which is what I just watched in one episode earlier today. Because I'm trash and it's trash and everything's trash for me watching it. There's a reason this has been copied in almost every single isekai story ever told. It makes sense. In a world like this, where there's monsters and magic and unexplored regions of the world and ruins that need to be gone through and dungeons that need to be explored, you have an adventurers guild to, protect people on the road or to fight and slay monsters. It's a classic fantasy trope, and they didn't create the Adventurers Guild in Mushoku Tensei, and I don't even know if they're the first isekai to use it. They're definitely one of the earliest ones, but I did not do enough research there. That's on me. So even if they were the first ones to come up with this idea, it's not a bad one. It's not Mushoku Tensei's fault that pretty much every single one that came out of this uses this as a cliche. And I'm so very grateful because I watched another one earlier today, also trash, where they went through that scene. Was like, all right, guys, we're gonna find out what power you are. Let's see what rank you are. And there's always the scenes of, oh no, the crystal broke because you're just S rank or above or anything like that. And they did not do that here. I like that. Thank God. I hate that trope so much. But as far as the story is concerned, this is a good thing. This gives them what they don't have. This gives them a chance to get a name for themselves and to use the dead end name as part of Rudius's greater strategy of getting people to like Supered again. Now we're going to see how Rudius screws that up along the way, but it's not his fault. Some of it is not his fault. That this is how it starts. And this is fine. Next up, Eris starts to complain that they didn't get a cool job like killing dragons, but Rudeus says it was a success, which Ruijierd doubts. But Rudeus says that they introduced him as dead end and nobody ran away, which is a small step to getting them respect again, and says that he gave Ruijierd Roxy's necklace to help with that image. And he expects it back later on because it's very precious to him. Nothing wrong with that, except for Rudeus' side of things. Now, Eris gets excited again, seeing the different gems and the light they make and the buildings in the city. Because she's never seen anything like what's going on in this specific town. And Rudeus says that they should rest for the day and books a room for 3, noticing they're also losing more money. Eris gets talked to by some fellow adventurers who don't know that she doesn't speak Demon God, and she snubs them in her usual way. And when they get in a little mini confrontation, she breaks her new cloak, which earlier Rudeus had bought for her. And this makes her attack them like a feral Eris, as she says that they broke the first piece of clothing Rudeus ever bought her. And of course, that means a lot to her. Rudeus then intervenes to stop her, apologizes for her behavior, and heals the adventurer she was hitting. And declines their offer to join them as they introduce themselves as Bachiro, Goblin, and Kurt. And that makes them the Tokurabu Toughs. I'm sure that's Japanese, didn't look it up outside of the Toughs. So they didn't leave, and our group goes to their hotel room, noting that at their current rank, they won't be able to afford a stable lifestyle. So they need to advance quickly. And as he sleeps, Rudeus meets with the man god again, who says that his directions got him to a city in safety and asks Rudeus to have some faith in him. He then tells Rudeus that he's no fun, when Rudeus, of course, refuses, and that when he does, that what he does later on is his choice to make, and tells him, hey, accept the job to find the lost kitten, as that will improve their lot. Rudeus wakes up to see Eris not sleeping. She asks him if they'll make it home, and he says that they will, and that their friends and families are okay. In the morning, they look for the cat, and Ruijierd leaves them with his third eye, eventually finding that it's been trapped by some opportunistic adventurers to make a profit. Their idea being, well, if we steal people's pets, they'll put the missions up there. We can go, oh, we found the animal you were looking for. Because they're ones who stole it, they can make a quick buck off of it. The cat is also like a panther of some kind, because demon cats are quite big. Now, they then attack the adventurers and try to interrogate them, but when one of them kicks Rudeus, Ruijierd immediately decapitates him in retaliation for daring to harm a child. And Rudeus tells him that he shouldn't kill people, but Ruijierd counters that the man was evil. Rudeus says killing people will make the Superior's reputation worse, but Ruijierd is having a hard time understanding his line of reasoning. However, Eris intervenes, and she gets him to stop after Rudeus says that he doesn't want to be afraid of Ruijierd. Their new captives ask if he's really a Superior, and Rudeus uses that as leverage to get them to explain their actions, which I explained earlier. But he stops Ruijierd from killing them, so Rudeus instead uses them, since they're a D rank party, to get what he wants, which is to go on C rank missions. Ruijierd, of course, does not like this, but Rudeus explains that they can use them to make the money that they need. A very clever idea. Eris hits Ruijierd to no effect, saying that Rudeus is doing this for their sakes because they need the money, which he agrees to, even though he doesn't like villains. Eris encounters back, you used to be a villain, so he can stop now like he's been trying to do for years, and she calls Rudeus amazing for thinking ahead as far ahead as he has, which does make Ruijierd stop as he promises to bring them home. Now, their new patsies have raised their party to sea level on Rudeus's blackmailing notes, and Rudeus tells them to take a B rank mission or else. They agree, as we see that horse demon from earlier, now named Nokopara, as he asks them what they're doing with P Hunter, the other group. And they kind of have that explanation, all that mess. Nothing really comes of it. There's that. It's set up for later on. So, our big conflict right here, excellent more on one side than the other, is Rudeus versus Ruijierd and their motivations. Rudeus is right in that they need to make money. They need to find a way to build up, the cultural understanding of the superb. Actually, they don't need to do that, but he chooses to do it anyway, and that's quite noble. So for Ruijierd to just kill people, for doing what that one demon did by kicking Rudeus away, undermines that. But at that same time, Ruijierd is right. These are no noble people here. These are scum who are causing issues in society. Now, obviously, the better thing to do would be for them to have been brought to the proper authorities, jail time being associated with, who did what and all that mess. But that's not what Ruijierd is going to think of. So while I kind of get a little ticked off, you shouldn't be killing people, there is a point behind what he's saying. He doesn't want people to think any more ill of the Super than they already do. And Rudeus just doesn't like seeing people die in front of him. I can't blame him for that. It's just a little naive on his part. But Ruijierd, in his own way, is very naive in that, well, what do you do with villains? Well, when villains act villainously, you kill them. And Eris is extremely right to point out, that's what you used to do. And yet you're doing good things now. How can you not understand that? Which does make him pause. And this is an effective enough scene. It's not the best episode out of the groupings, but it does its job. It's fine. And that brings us to episode 11, Children and Warriors. Now we start with Roxy going to where I think this is Renoa. I'd have to look it up again. With her seeing the devastation left behind where Rudeus had been, and she tries to locate him to no avail, although he's not listed among the dead, nor is his family, which does raise her spirits just a little bit. And she hears a dwarf man and an elf woman behind him, remarking that the woman kind of wishes that Paul had been sent to another world. And as we eventually find out who this character is, not in this part of the season, but later on, that makes a lot of sense. And they're now searching for them, and Roxy then asks them if she knows Rudeus' family. This then gets us to some narration by Paul as he is writing a letter to Rudeus that he has sent to multiple different locations because he doesn't know where Rudeus is, hoping that maybe he goes to an adventurer's guild or something and picks it up. And he explains that Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha are missing, but he himself is with Norn, and he doesn't know where Rudeus is at, but he's going to find the others as he believes Rudeus will be fine on his own. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, of course, Paul's going to be worried about him, but he knows what Rudeus is capable of as a very young mage. So him not being his top priority, I'm fine with that. I've seen some people say that makes him a worse father than he already is. I completely and utterly disagree with that. I think Paul is in the right here, at least initially, and we'll see what happens later on. Paul states that he's going to Millis, which is Zenith's, goodness gracious, my lisp, Zenith's homeland, to find her, and tells him to search the central continent, and he'll do whatever it takes to find them, even though his fortune's gone as a result of him also being forcibly teleported away. Great opening scene here. We have Roxy. Was she forcibly teleported? We can't really tell right now, but her priority is to look after Rudeus, which makes sense. He's the one person she's made the most of a connection with in the 20-some years she's left home. So yeah, I'm sure she's worried about her family, but as we'll learn, there's something in her backstory that kind of makes her not want to head that way, at least initially. And when that does happen, it'll make more sense. But for right now, with the information we have presented in front of us, it makes a lot more sense for her to go to Rudeus first and try and figure out where he is, because he's her star pupil. She loves this kid platonically at this moment. Imagine that. Something's going to change. But and that's a very noble goal. And these two people she's going to meet are going to be engaging characters in their own right. One of them I'm going to have more problems with than the other. I can't imagine why you would think that, but we'll get there when we get there. And Paul's letter also, like I said earlier, it makes perfect sense for me. What I know of Paul, for him to tell Rudius, look, I know you, I know what you're capable of. Even if you got taken away elsewhere, you're going to be fine because I know you. But the others, I need to look after them. Like his sisters, they're kids. They're not like him. They're not prodigies. They don't know what's going on. Like the women are gone. And yeah, Zenith is a very capable person, but she's by herself. She doesn't have her equipment on her. Like anything could happen. And God knows what could happen to Lily and Aisha. So no wonder Paul goes after them instead of his son. I am A-OK with that line of thinking. That makes logical and pragmatic sense to me. Now, continuing on in the episode, Rudius explains that their job now is to investigate a monster in the petrified forest, which they will earn iron pieces for killing and finding. I'm assuming that's the currency. Eris asks if it's strong and gets excited because that's our lovable little murder goblin. They then go to investigate the forest, finding the Toughs, the adventuring group they met in the last episode, are being attacked and messed with by a rival adventuring group, and they find that they're all there for the same job. Ruijierd tells them he's worried about the children in the other group, as they've all kind of split off and gone their separate ways, and he asks if Rudius would leave them to die. So Rudius relents, and they follow them. They see them get attacked by this giant insect and a giant snake monster, but Rudius stops Ruijierd from intervening because he wants things to be more desperate. This way they have more leverage later on, and they look cooler doing so. However, since they waited, one of them dies, forcing Ruijierd and Eris to intervene to save the others. They kill the beast, but the Toughs are afraid now that this has happened, and Ruijierd asks Rudius why he stopped them, saying he could have saved them earlier. But Rudius is silent, at least initially, knowing that it's his fault that this happened. And Ruijierd gets mad at him, and the other adventurers try to intervene as Ruijierd has picked him up, placed him against a tree. And this makes Ruijierd relent when he hears what Kurt has to say. When they explain their situation, they knew it was dangerous, and now they suffered a penalty for that. That's the adventuring life. Ruijierd then comforts Kurt and apologizes for treating him like a child instead of a full-fledged warrior. They then leave as the party dead end remains behind to find the monster, which is engaged with the other adventuring party. Now, Rudius's plan. In another light novel series, this would have worked. But there is some realism within Mushoku Tensei, and I appreciate this. It's not my favorite thing in the world I've ever done, but I appreciate it. In that Rudius is thinking, hey, like, if we wait till things look extremely dire, that's when the heroes show up and they do their job. But he's misread the situation. And that has already happened. And as a result of that, countless people, one of their group has died. And had they intervened sooner, this wouldn't have happened. And this forces him to grow up a bit. And it's something he needed to have done for his character. He can't keep thinking of what's the flashiest thing we could do? What's the coolest thing we can do? And like I said, in a lesser show, and I'm raising this up a little bit for this statement, that would have happened. They would have looked cool, and the other adventuring group would have been saved. No one would have been in any danger after they had intervened. But instead, he learns the harsh reality of, hey, someone was in trouble. You better get in there and save them. Doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter what you say, get in there. They're still alive if you intervene. And because they didn't, someone is dead. That's a harsh lesson, but it's one he needs to learn. I'm very grateful for that because as many times as I get upset at this show, Rudeus is not perfect. And the author never makes him perfect. He never says he's the best of the best of the best. And he does no wrong. There are plenty of things that I don't like about his aspect. We've talked about his sexual nature. But when it comes to your typical isekai story, your main character is going to be that person. He's flawless, and all the girls fall for him because he's got the personality of a wet shirt left in the mud. And that's exactly what girls are attracted to, right, guys? That guy reading that right now, that's you. You don't have that personality. You suck, but they're going to fall for you. We're going to make this character as generic as possible. And Rudeus is not. Like I've said before, Rudeus ruins everything, but I'm not going to sit here and say everything he does is wrong. Every time he's characterized, it's done poorly. No, this is good because it means he has flaws and actual flaws that he's going to work on rather than the flaws that the author makes and says, these are okay. He's fine. No, this is a flaw that needed to be addressed as soon as possible. It is, and Rudeus is better off for it. Also, so I think I forgot to talk about the name Dead End. I like that name a lot because I mean, what a perfect name for a character who has been around for 400 some years. Every time you go up against him, hey, it's like you've met the end of the road. It's a dead end. Don't fight Ruijierd the Superb. Great name. Rudeus using it for his own. It's it's kind of a weird bit of cultural appropriation, but I can get behind it because I like the spirit of what he's doing. So I'm not upset about that. I have seen some people say that, and I think they're just being overly sensitive to a problem that doesn't exist. So there's that. Moving on. We didn't see that the group finds a red hood cobra, which is the culprit that they were supposed to be investigating, and it is killing the other adventurers as they go to intervene to save them. Rudeus fires off a blast as Ruijierd slices through the cobra with Eris's help. They then kill the cobra after Rudeus hits it with further magic. Eris celebrates killing it as Ruijierd tells them that they were too late to save the other party. The lesson's not over. They then return to the city, confronted by Nokopara, who says he knows what they've planned and they could lose their licenses if he speaks, which he won't do if they give him half of what they earn. This, of course, causes a major conundrum between the three of them. What should they do? Ruijierd would probably just murder him right then and there. Eris has not figured out exactly what he's done yet. And Rudeus has figured it out too. And it's like, well, what could we do? And he says that he'll do anything to get Eris back, even if it means destroying the whole city as he starts summoning a storm. But he stops himself because if he allows this to happen, it would be a betrayal of Ruijierd and the plan that he's formed to get people like the Superb again. So he cancels the storm, but not enough to where, hey, rain is still formed. And it falls down and it washes away the blue dye from Ruijierd's head, making it green again, which makes Nokopara realize who he is, which causes the people nearby to run away and panic. Ruijierd takes him, chokes him, but Rudeus tells him to stop. Nokopara apologizes, saying that he has children, and Ruijierd tells him that they'll leave the city. And if he ever finds out that their licenses are revoked, he'll know who's responsible, and he leaves without killing the demon. Rudeus then sees Kurt and his friend from the Tufts scared and asks them why, saying Ruijierd had just saved their lives, and they apologize, but they're not at the point they can't come over their prejudices. So Rudeus and Eris leave to go find Ruijierd, which they do outside of the city, as Rudeus asks him why he didn't say anything, why he didn't try to defend himself. Say, like, I've done these things for you people. I've done this for 400 years, and yet you people look at me like this terrible entity that is some monster in, demon form, which is a weird thing to say, but it makes sense for the series. And they didn't apologize to each other. A great moment, as Rudeus says that his childish scheme didn't work, but Ruijierd says that he's finally understanding Rudeus's resolve to get this done, as he felt Rudeus's killing intent against Nokopara. But he also noticed when Rudeus stopped himself from following through with it, which he appreciates, as Rudeus was desperate to protect Eris, which makes him a warrior in Ruijierd's eyes. And Ruijierd says that warriors protect children and protect their comrades, and that Rudeus should focus on his pride rather than improving the Superd name. But Rudeus disagrees with him, and which they both agree to being that both of them are stubborn on these ideas, and then they just have a good laugh as friends. With Rudeus accepting Ruijierd's hand for a handshake, and then Eris joins in, not wanting to be left out, not having understood pretty much anything about that conversation. Later, Rudeus sees that Ruijierd has shaved his hair, so that this won't happen again. So Rudeus gives him a headband to keep his third eye out of sight. They then agree to go continue adventuring as Dead End, with their goal being to reach the Asura Kingdom. Meanwhile, Roxy has joined the dwarf and elf from earlier, who are still unnamed at this point in time, to go find Rudeus, and she has left to go to the demon continent to do so. And that is how we end season 1, part 1. A great ending. Excuse me. In fact, better scored than something I was talking about earlier. This is great. It shows Rudeus is still naive. Maybe a little too naive for someone who's mentally in his 40s, but several of those years were spent away from other people. I will cut a little slack that way. And it shows the cost of that naivete. People died multiple times over. If they had intervened earlier, would they have reached the other party in time to save them too? We'll never know. We'll never know, because he had to make things flashy. Because he wanted to improve the name of the Superd, a noble idea, but his follow through fails. And that is good. And the scene at the end between Rudeus and Ruijierd, like, we finally understand each other. I'm acknowledging you as a warrior, which means a lot to me in my culture. You're not a child, you are a warrior. But I'm still going to protect you as a child because I can't see you as anything other than that, even though I will acknowledge you as a warrior. And Rudeus not wanting to change the fact that he still wants to improve the name of Superd, as thanks for the man who saved their life, who could have easily taken advantage of them in a very desperate situation, in one of the greatest twists in this story. And this is how the season 1, part 1 ends. And I'm very happy. I will not maintain this happiness for quite some time, but as far as all the episodes I've released for Why I Don't Like, this is going to be the most positive of them all. And it's almost like, if you focus on your story, if you focus on your world building, instead of creating scenarios where Rudeus gets to ruin things, you have a great story to tell. So tell that story. If this show had been more like most of the aspects of these 3 episodes, I would love this show. It would probably be one of my favorite isekai, if not my favorite. But that doesn't happen. We focus on too many things that are obvious author fetishes, that are obvious excuses for ideas like, it's okay, guys. he's not going to do anything. But even when he does something, isn't it just funny? She said no several times, Eris did, but it's fine. He pervs on his teacher, Roxy, but it's just like a little kid doing it, forgetting that he's mentally older. I hate that. I will always hate that. You will never hear me say anything differently, but that doesn't happen as much in these episodes. There's a couple of moments, as we noted, but if they hadn't happened, I would have rated this whole thing a lot higher. Because when the author chooses to focus on characters, when he chooses to focus on the world building and the plot, this is an A tier, if not an S tier story, to use the ranking system of the guilds. And that's why I find this thing so frustrating. And you will see my appreciation for the series not die, but anguish and lose its luster and shrivel up as we continue on with the story, as we will be going into the second part of this first season. I hate that they do that, but I also understand. Why not just release it all at once? I'm not going to say anything else on that. So rankings for these episodes. These are going to surprise you. Episode 9, A, just a solid A. And it would have been an A plus without that scene of Rudeus, without several scenes of Rudeus perving on his mentor, even though she's not around, and what he was doing with Eris when she was in a completely vulnerable position. After making a promise with her that nothing would happen until she's 15, or he's 15, I think. Hate that. Other than that, world building, phenomenal. Magic, introducing the demonic cataclysms. I want who have been the person who have made that idea. I am so jealous as an author of something like that. I cannot put that into words, just how much jealousy fills my heart because of something like that. Episode 10. I give it a B minus. It's an inoffensive episode for the most part. The only really bad thing is like Rudy is perving on the secretary guild woman, blah blah blah. But the story, it's fine. It's not the most engaging thing in the world. Ruijierd side of things. Oh wait, am I getting ahead of myself? Yeah, yeah, that works really well. Then episode 11. This is going to be the most shocking one of all. A plus. That is how you end a season, or at least the first part of a season, to get me hyped up for more. And even though I know what is going to happen, I am still hyped because of how this is set up, and it's set up extremely well. If only the follow through had done the same. So that's it. Next time we'll be focusing on season 1, part 2, episodes 1 to 2, which is, I don't know how I'm going to do that for the numbering and everything, but we'll get there when we get there. So guys, thank you for listening. I had a lot of fun. So I even remembered to do the music. Like this video, comment below, and subscribe to the Systematic Geekology or Anazal Ministries podcasting pages. You can email me at whyidon'tlikepodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in my fiction writing, you can find my works at stubbornwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching the name MC Ashley. You can also find me podcasting on Systematic Geekology and Let Nothing Move You. Special thanks to Joshua Knoll for the music he provides for the podcast. And with all that in mind, I spent a lot of time discussing what I don't like about Mushoku Tensei. But do you know what I do like? You listeners. I like you. So see ya, Space Cowboys.